So everyone is complaining that there's no money, economy is hard, things are tight, the money they're making is not enough. Why wouldn't the government simply print more money? Well, today I'm going to explain to you exactly why a government should not print more money and push it into the economy when things are not going well for the populace. Firstly, let's step back a little bit and talk about the history of money. In the past, and I mean past, before any of us were born, the way money worked was that if somebody needed something from another person, they would have to barter or trade a promise. Back in the days, the promise of simply giving you value in exchange for something that you had was enough. For example, if I was a farmer and I needed something that worked like a tractor that I was going to attach to my horses to be able to plow my fields, I could go meet the ironsmith and promise him, okay, once my crops are ready, I'm going to bring you 10 bags of grain or 10 tubers of yam, or whatever it is the value attached to that particular thing is. And because, of course, we were neighbors and we worked together constantly, that was completely enough. As time went on, people started to actually do what I call trade by barter system, which is ultimately actually physically going to the person you're trying to get something from with something else that is of value. So for example, if I needed a tool from you, I could come to you with a bag of grain or a bag of salt or some tubers of yam or some rice in exchange for a plow, some cutlasses, some hoes that I'm going to use on my farm for the next planting season. And that worked for the longest time. Except over time, this also became a problem because you can't simply be carrying such large amounts of things everywhere, every time when you want to actually buy things or exchange things. This is an Xbox, costs like ₦1 million, right? How many bags of, or how many tubers of yam would I have to exchange with Microsoft for them to give me this Xbox for me to be able to enjoy it in my house? It's a problem. So we actually came up with a system which initially was very efficient, which was money. We were straight up exchanging things for gold coins and silver coins because gold and silver can last forever and it can simply continue to exchange hands without necessarily being cumbersome to carry around. And of course, people in the Ayé Àtijọ́ and the olden days figured this out and they started to use coins and money. Gradually, banks were created for people who were making large amounts of money to be able to store their money. Even people who were making small money to avoid being robbed because your money would be insured in a bank, and if the bank got robbed, you would still get your money from the people who owned the bank. Instead of having to physically go around with your gold all the time, they started to create debt notes, or would I call them paper money. Essentially, it's an order that says, I have this amount of gold in the bank, and you can actually go to the bank at any time to withdraw this amount of gold in exchange for what you're about to give me. That was completely enough because everyone trusted the banking system. And the bankers figured this out. So what do? They start to create money out of thin air. I'll explain that to you. If I loan somebody money, there's interest expected. That is assuming I am a bank, right? So maybe the interest on $100 or 100 naira is 5 naira. For every 100 naira that I loan out, I get 5 naira in return, which means if I give you 100 naira, you give me 105 naira back. When I'm a banker and I figure out that, okay, everybody is simply now doing transactions with the notes that we're issuing. They don't really know how much gold we have in reserve or how much silver we have in reserve. We can simply continue to loan people these notes, not the actual money. They can do business with it and then they can work and come back and pay us 5 naira extra for every 100 naira that we loan out. So why can't we just simply continue to do this? As long as everybody doesn't collectively come together and decide they want to take their money from us, the system continues to function and nobody ever has to detect the fact that we are creating money out of thin air. Two things happen here. More money enters the system because the money that you're actually giving to people is not exactly real, or it's not real, if I do say so myself. But it also creates more money in the economy without, and I'm saying this specifically, without productivity going up. So there's no new people working, there's no new work being implemented, nothing spectacular is happening. They're simply creating money out of debt. And at the end of the day, what this is going to eventually lead to is a lot of debt without anyone really being able to account for where that money went to. Because the business is going to pay their employees, and then their employees are also going to spend some of that money paying for goods and services. And with the way the debt system works and people are using credit scores to buy cars and buy houses and this and that, and constantly refinancing loans that they took at ridiculous percentages because of inflation, this money just continues to manufacture out of thin air. But in reality, the amount of gold that's in the store and the amount of silver that's being stored cannot cover for the amount of money that's in circulation. And this is where the 5 reasons why you should not simply print money or create money out of thin air when you need more money in your economy comes in. The first one being inflation reduces your purchasing power as a people. So because there's more money in circulation, but the amount of work and productivity going around is still the same thing, the prices of those goods and services are going to increase. So something people could have paid 1 naira for, they may now need to start paying 5, 6, 7, 8 naira because there's more money in the economy. We might as well charge more for our services. People need our services. Why the hell not? But unfortunately, some of that money that is being increased into these prices is not real money, as we've just discussed. The second thing that you have to consider with this is hyperinflation, because when the currency becomes rubbish, you start seeing billions in notes that people have to use to buy basic things like bread. Imagine having to carry an entire wheelbarrow of money to just be able to buy a few tubers of yam. It's insane, and that defeats the purpose we initially talked about of people being able to inconspicuously buy things with small quantities or small amounts of money. Take Zimbabwe, for example. Their own currency stopped being useful in the early 2000s to the point where they had to switch back to using the US dollar to be able to do business properly. And the third thing is the most obvious one. There's going to be a loss of trust in the currency. So you're going to hear things like people telling you to start saving your money in stable coin, which we've probably discussed a few times ourselves on my own pages. You know, save your money in the US dollar because the naira is unpredictable. It can go up, it can come down, it can dance, it can this, it can that. You might lose your money if you actually keep your life savings in your local currency. And of course, none of this is misleading because this is actual reality that we're experiencing. There's devaluation going on and people are literally losing everything they've saved to the fact that the naira is being devalued every single year. Ultimately, when excessive money has been printed, interest rates have to be increased so that some of that money has to come back and then they can cancel it out. I mean, for example, if loans were previously 5%, at some point you might start hearing you're paying 15% for the same amount of money you loaned 10 years ago for only 5%. Why? Because the realities on ground no longer match and the inflation is absolutely insane. Somehow, the checks and balances have to be figured out and that money needs to be cancelled out, because when you loan money from a bank and maybe you're paying them 5 naira on every 100 naira, for example, so for 10,000 naira that you loaned, you have to pay them 10,500 naira. You pay them 10,500 naira back. That loan is cancelled because initially the money was not even real to begin with. And the only thing they get to keep is the 500 naira interest, which you had to go and work for and bring to them. But again, all of that money was cancelled out because it wasn't real money to begin with. And finally, unfortunately, printing more money when you simply don't have in your local currency is actually not going to clear out your national debt, because most of your debt is obviously in a foreign currency. For most countries, it's in the US dollar. And what then tends to happen is, after you've printed so much more money and your currency is devalued and inflation has gone up, you still have to convert your currency in goods and services into the US dollar to be able to pay back your debts to the people who you owe or the people who hold your bonds. So how do countries actually manage debt? And I promise you, as we start to talk about these 4 things I'm about to express to you, you would start to see similarities between them and the reality on ground where you currently live. The first thing that you should do is actually increase taxes and start to tax the rich a lot more, even the poor a lot more. You tax everybody so much more. You start to introduce new taxes. Maybe you didn't have taxes on tariff of electricity before, you have to tax that now. It becomes more expensive. Maybe you were subsidizing the price of petroleum products. You start to actually remove that subsidy and start taxing those products as well, so that people start paying more and you start taking more money out of the economy so that you can balance for the inflation that was already happening because you printed too much money in the first place. The second thing is taxation is not going to work as quickly as possible. As much as you're trying to clamp down on people and trying to get them to pay more taxes, and you're trying to introduce more taxes and tariffs on every single thing, you still need money now. And it's not something that you can just, again, print more money to solve. So now you have to borrow from the people who you already own. That is, people you borrowed from in foreign currencies. And that then again increases your debt, but it solves the problem in the short term. And the third thing, which is probably the most effective way to solve the situation when you want to manage your debt, or you've had an inflation situation and hyperinflation situation, is to simply cut down on your spending, especially governmental spending. I think this is probably a place where Nigeria has not really been able to figure things out, because we are still spending a lot of money on governance and we have still not been able to cut back on our expenses. So things like allocating several billions and trillions of naira renovating a building for a government official, or buy new cars for people in the National Assembly and this and that. There are things we cannot afford to be doing. But of course, I am not in a position of power and I don't get to make these decisions. It's up to the big men and the people in power. So, and of course, encouraging investment into your economy and economic growth is probably the surest way and the most long-term way to get the entire situation under control. But unfortunately, if you have policies that are taxing people a lot more, foreign investors are not going to be interested in coming to invest in your country. So are you going to be giving the investors tax write-offs, which then ultimately doesn't allow you get more money to solve the problem you were trying to solve in the first place? You're also probably going to notice a lot of investors exiting the country. That is people who were already in the country exiting your economy because it's just too difficult to do business. Economic growth is going to be more difficult, but if you can manage to convince and peruse foreign investors to come into your economy and actually invest more money back into it, that is real money that you're getting in foreign currencies that you were already owing in, and then you could use that to cure some of your national debt, and you could generally do better. Your entire economy is going to get better. People are going to be able to make more money, real money, and there will be more money in circulation for more work because more work just came in and there's a demand for more products and services. So of course, after talking about these things, I'm sure you can see real life similarities with the situation in your country and how things are being handled. Whether your lawmakers and your government is handling things properly or they are doing the right things is completely between you and the government. If you need to write a note to your legislators, if you need to write letters, or you need to call the people who are your representatives, absolutely do that if necessary. Hopefully this has enlightened you a little bit more about why countries should simply not print money when they're in debt and they want to secure a national debt. Why? So freelancers, people who are working for people abroad and actually bringing money into the economy that didn't previously exist in this economy, maybe you should work at that this year. It might be the only solution we have to the situation that's on ground. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess I will see you on another video that was shot by Kagan. You're welcome.